is a nonpartisan organization which seeks to promote active participation of citizens in government. The League neither supports nor opposes candidates for office at any level. Recordings of this event may not be used without the express written approval of the League. No part of a League-sponsored video production may be used in advertising or in any way to promote a candidate. The League will only allow audio, video of this event to be broadcast in its entirety. The format for tonight will be as follows. I'll call on each candidate and they will have 1 minute for their introduction. They will then have 1.5 minutes to answer each question. Questions were compiled and sent to them by the Pocatello League. We will not be taking questions from the audience this evening, and viewers will be muted. We'll hear first from the mayoral candidates in alphabetical order, followed by City Council Seat 6 candidate. Rick Cheatham was not able to join us this evening, and because of the late notice given by Mr. Cheatham, we will allow James Bucci to participate. We'll rotate the candidates through the questions. In 1 minute, please introduce yourself and share with the voters what prompted you to run for this office and the experience you bring to this position. We'll start with Brian Blatt.
Good evening, and thank you very much for hosting this meeting. I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for your time and your efforts and everything that you're doing to help people get the message out of what our stance are on different things. Thank you very much for your time. My name is Brian Blatt. I'm currently the mayor of the city of Pocatello. I think most people know me fairly well, but I'll just introduce myself very quickly. I have a wife of 31 years. Her name is Laura. I have 4 wonderful children. I've got 2 stepsons and I've got 3 grandchildren. And so we've been very busy on that end of things, but it's very exciting to be a part of this. And I appreciate you and your time that you've been spending here with us to make sure that we can get our word out. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll next hear from Idaho Sierra. Is Mr. Sierra with us?
I did not see that he's joined tonight.
Okay, we'll go on. The next candidate would be Chris Stevens.
Thank you. I am running because I believe our people deserve more transparent, citizen-centered, fiscally responsible local government. I ran on these principles as a city council candidate, and I find them very compelling today. I believe that after nearly 20 years as a middle school administrator and 2 years on city council, I have skills and insights to guide Pocatello. I participate in a variety of volunteer civic organizations, and I have experience creating, implementing, and adapting strategic long-range plans and understand the need for collaborative planning, budgeting among departments with sometimes competing interests. I have chosen to make Pocatello my home after retiring from the local school district. Thank you.
Okay, next we'll hear from David Worley. You'll have to unmute, Mr. Worley.
Hey, sorry about that. Had to quiet something noisy going on here.
Okay.
And my apologies, my camera for some reason isn't working. So I'll have to go without the visual here. So yeah, a brief introduction of who I am. So born and raised here in Pocatello, actually went to Pocatello High School, graduated from there, and did a couple years at ISU, but I finished my degree over in Virginia at George Mason University with a degree in political science. My wife and I grew up here. My wife is also from here, met in high school, and we have 5 kids. And most of my experience comes from being in the military. So I have 19 years of military service. I'm still a drilling reservist with the Army National Guard, but that time includes 12 years of active duty assignments, including 3 deployments overseas. and I'm currently a infantry officer and a major. Thank you.
Thank you. And now City Council seat number 6 candidate, James Bucci.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting me, and thanks everyone for joining. That's my son walking around shaking his head like, Dad, do the camera. All right. He's my tech support. So if you see him, that's what that's all about. And the reason I'm running is essentially because of him. All right. I'm just your common everyday laborer. I've cleaned toilets, stocked shelves, my God, landscaping, construction. I've done so many jobs. It's ridiculous. And it seems like us laborers don't get a voice in the government. It seems like as though we're missing out. And so I believe this is my chance to actually speak up for all of us. And these people, they don't really vote much. And I'm hoping to get them out to the polls to vote. I don't care if they're voting for me, just as long as they're out there making a decision. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay. The Pocatello finance policy to develop a city budget includes a list of capital investments and infrastructure. What priorities will you focus on funding? And how do you think the budget planning process can be improved? And how will you ensure that our tax money is used wisely? We'll start with Chris Stevens.
Okay, before we can even get to priorities, the most important thing we need to do is get a strategic plan in place. The priorities would then be identified and timelined as part of developing that plan. The spending plan would flow from the strategic plan. The annual budget would flow from the strategic spending plan and the strategic plan, and create what is termed annual budget drivers. A well-constructed strategic plan and accompanying spending plan is best practice precisely because it does ensure that public money is spent wisely and effectively. It's difficult in the current process to prioritize because we have no long-range plan. We have no clear vision of who we want to be and how we want to get there and what the timeline is for achieving our goals. That has to be in place, and then you can begin to set very specific project priorities.
Thank you. David Worley.
Yeah, so something I thought that was interesting was highlighted in the article that was introduced in the question there is that, before we're even going to talk about how to improve the process, I think we should first try following the process that we have. So it sounds like we have a pretty good financial policy in place, but we're just not following it. We're not developing a strategic plan. We're not setting those priorities. And I'm not going to highlight too much more. This is one of the rare points where Chris Stevens and I agree. There does need to be some more long-term vision for what we're doing and not constantly, finding the targets right in front of your face. But when it comes to that second part of the question, how you ensure our tax money is used wisely, I think that when you look at the structure of the city's government and you look at how it operates, there's definitely rooms for reform in the organizational structure to reduce administrative overhead, reduce redundancy, and even work towards privatizing city services and functions that can better be performed by businesses in our local community. So, when we talk about using tax dollars wisely, the question is, are we getting the bang for the buck? Are we actually doing things in ways where we're making sure that the taxpayer is getting a return on investment? Are there ways that we can do things where we provide the exact same service, but at lower costs? And I think privatization of some city assets is going to play a major role in that in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. James Bucci.
All right, thank you. There are a couple things I will prioritize. It's going to be the police and schools, because a city is nothing without the people, and the better the people are, the better off we're going to be. Okay, so we need more reach out programs. There's a wicked big drug problem here. I don't know if you guys see it. I see it all the time. I walk everywhere. I know it was worse back in the day, and it's been getting better, but we have a long ways to go on that. And also with the schooling, I would like to see more interaction between schools across this country, maybe even the world, because look what we're doing right now. We're Zooming stuff. We need to get the infrastructure for that to be able to do this. Sorry, I got a cat. She's crazy. We do need more transparency on where our tax dollars are going. Let's see. And we need to set up goals, like I said, police and schooling, but the wastewater treatment, we have the Northgate that's going to be building, that's going to be bringing a lot more people in. Can that system handle all the wastewater that's going to be coming in there? We need to look ahead towards that and how many people we are actually going to be having or planning to have in this city. Sorry, those are cats. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got on that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Brian Blatt?
Thank you very much, and thank you for the question. I think it's very important for everybody to understand the budgeting process the city goes through on an annual basis. Every year, we have our city departments present to us a service level report. That service level report explains to the council and the mayor the 5-year plan that they have, their future growth needs. It also explains what they have done in the past year to spend in the taxpayers' dollars. And so they have done a great job. I have that service level report right here in my hands. You can see that fairly easily. It's a fairly thick report. They come in, we discuss it on a regular basis. We also have had a discussion a number of times on the important needs, future needs and issues and things that we might need. That list is right here. That list was also talked about in that op-ed that we talked about. Those department heads got together, put a list together. We were actually suggested 5 of the many things that we needed to take care of today. And we suggested that some of those were taken out of the budget at the end of the budget. When it comes to actually putting a budget together that is sustainable, the city of Pocatello has done an incredible job doing that, following the financial policies to a T. It's just been incredible to the point that we have an excess reserves. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. In 2019, Mayor Blatt and the City Council approved a resolution that committed the city of Pocatello to, quote, clean energy, conserving resources, and increasing energy efficiency, and authorized a task force to, quote, further the goals of the resolution. How will you support the resolution and task force if you are elected? We'll begin with David Worley.
So I'm going to say at the gate that I have a little bit of an issue with some of the premise of the question here. I think that energy efficient is good, and if we should find ways to save, energy in anything that we do, that's also cost savings. It helps the city be more efficient. And in terms of the overall concept of green energy, most green energy projects aren't really good for the communities or they're enacted. One of the ones that's local here that we see is the wind farms. They don't produce really a lot of energy, and they actually kill thousands of birds every year. And they produce a huge amount of waste. I mean, right now they're building these huge graveyards for the wind blades that wear out over time, and we have no good way of disposing them. So we're burying them in the earth in Wyoming. So I'm not really interested in participating in, the whole clean energy, green program if it's not actually going to produce real power and it's not going to improve the efficiency of energy production in the city. I mean, there are some places I think we could go, like nuclear energy is very clean and plentiful, and we have some natural assets in the area, such as the INL being so close, like a nuclear program at ISU. That may not necessarily fit within the city, but I would support something like a regional nuclear power plant so that we could have, sustainable, clean energy in the future that's a proven energy production technique, as opposed to some of the new stuff that's been coming out. In terms of carbon footprint reduction, a lot of times what that really equates to for the average citizen is a higher cost of living, and most green energy stuff is that. Thank you.
Thank you. James Bucci?
Okay, honestly, I think Greta Thunberg, who's a global activist on this, stood up at the Youth Climate and mocked the platitudes of the world leaders because we are not moving fast enough. Like Mr. Worley said, the wind turbines ain't his thing because they're throwing away the blades and all that. That's fine. But killing birds, I mean, cats kill 1 billion birds a year in America. Like, I'm not too concerned about the birds like that. I'm not trying to mock you, I'm just saying. But you're right, like the wind blades, we need to do something with those. It doesn't mean we should just throw away that wind power. And like what this city did with energy. We gave them a grant to rebuild their building. And in return, we got 10 full-time jobs from that. And energy doesn't also help us. They're reaching out all these third world disasters with their solar power and how they can, like the batteries they got, they're even longer lasting, and they're working with INL. I do agree with Worley about INL and nuclear energy and all that too. We need to use every resource available, but we really need to get away from oil and coal. Now for the city, it's obvious, like, I don't want to go California crazy and start getting rid of the gas powered mowers and blowers. That's not right. But the trucks that move them, we can move them into the electric variety instead of having gas powered. Thanks.
Thank you. Brian Blatt?
Thank you. As Pocatello's mayor for the past 12 years, I have been recognized as a leader in local conversations efforts, in addition to maintaining the tradition of Earth Day proclamation for the past 9 years. Specifically, my leadership has been instrumental in establishing or bolstering the following actions and programs. Citywide curbside recycling program has 15,500 participants, recycling 2,100 tons of material a year, signifying how important that program to our local residents in the community are. That is a 10% diversion rate to our landfill. In addition of glass recycling program, 2018 to today, we have collected 613 tons of glass. We've also collected $12,625 for that glass. And that is a reduction of 2.8% of waste going into our landfill. Yard waste, compost, and Bannock County landfill, supported by Pocatello Sanitation and garbage collection, is 800 tons, is a diversion of about 3% diversion rate for that. We have a very strong urban transit transit system, which is available to all residents. We've supported the Bike to Work program. We make.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Chris Stevens?
Sure, thank you. First of all, the task force needs to be reconstituted to include knowledgeable members of the community rather than almost exclusively city employees. We have a lot of real expertise in this city, and we really don't tap it, in my view. I would like to see the city engage the public by inviting community experts to assist with developing a number of important plans, one of them being a plan for reducing our carbon footprint. I would like to say briefly, although this question is clearly focused locally, that there is actually a carbon fee and dividend program that is broadly supported by economists, by oil companies, and by politicians on both sides of the aisle. And there are some very, very viable ways nationally and globally that we can economically address carbon footprint. But here locally, we absolutely need to include people who have retired from who have retired from the site, who have expertise beyond the expertise that our valuable city employees have and could be contributing for no cost, incredibly valuable insights and research as we try to solve this problem.
Thank you. Since the last election, we've seen growth in our communities that requires an increase in infrastructure development. In regards to projects such as New Day and Northgate, how would you approach the need for this growth to have a sustainable footprint? And how is the city preparing and funding the infrastructure, including roads, water, sewers, and water sanitation? James Bucci.
All right. When we're talking about infrastructure, all the new buildings that are coming up, they should be made with like the windows and all that, the light fixtures, the faucets, sinks. They're going to be water saving and like the windows, you're not going to get too much drafts from them. All right. But the question is, how many people are we going to have in this city? Because when you bring up the recycling is really expensive. That's one thing the mayor didn't bring up earlier is, what are we going to do? Because once China cut the world off for their recycling, everything, all the prices on it have gone up. So we need to figure out what we're going to be doing with all this extra waste we have. Like I said earlier, the wastewater treatment plant, is it going to be able to hold an extra 10, 20,000 people's worth of waste in the future? We need to make sure our upgrades are proper. In regards to the roads and stuff, I'm not too concerned with that. I think we'll be getting money from the infrastructure bill that we should be able to put forward towards this. So we shouldn't have to worry too much about that from what I've been reading. But yeah, it all depends on how much growth that we have, and we need to start planning for that ahead of time, like now, especially in regards to recycling, because it really is way too expensive at this point.
Thank you. Brian Blatt.
Thank you. Infrastructure is a project that requires cooperation between both private and public sectors. Developers are required to budget, fund, and install the infrastructure in their development. For our part in infrastructure development, part of our 5-year plan includes facilities and infrastructure improvement plans. The city maintains complex software programs that help the city anticipate future growth. We also take seriously the call to reducing the burden on the taxpayers by obtaining federal grants to fund and maintain these infrastructure projects. In the Northgate development, we created the first private-public partnership for development in the state of Idaho, where the developer paid most of the cost. The city, the county, and the state have very little cost in that development as it has been developed. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Stevens.
Sure. Cities do have some control over the ordinances that govern development within their boundaries. Exactly what cities can require relative to new construction is frankly a legal department question. The question did come up a while back relative to requiring xeriscaping for new construction, but there wasn't a lot of traction on the council for an in-depth discussion. So legal really didn't have an opportunity to give us much info. Relative to Northgate, it's what's called a tax increment finance district. And that means that properties pay the equivalent of property taxes into a tax increment fund in lieu of property taxes. And then that money is used to repay city, county, developers, other partners who have helped pay for infrastructure. Unless it closes early, Northgate will not go on to the property tax rolls until about 2045. It's currently not performing as projected, and there's now a $21 million lawsuit against the city. So how Northgate's going to gel out at the end of the day, I'm not really sure. Again, in order to plan for long-term infrastructure and so forth, we need not only departmental plans, but we need an overall city strategic plan.
Thank you. David Worley.
I think the Northgate project is a perfect example of actually how we are not really preparing very well for investments in the city. So we are years behind schedule in development of that area. It's questionable whether or not, with the lawsuit and the other issues, we're actually going to be able to bring in businesses into that area quickly. And some of the ones that were supposed to come or we were promised to come have already pulled out or ended up not being something that was a really viable partner for the city. So whether or not we're going to get anything other than the dust field that you see right now, I think is questionable. But in terms of how are we going to get growth in the city, so we're saying, how do we prepare for growth? Well, how do we get growth in the first place? I think if you look at the history of Pocatello compared to other cities around us, it's obvious that a lot of cities are doing things differently and are attracting businesses better than we are. Chubbuck historically has attracted businesses better than us. They're way more business dense. Idaho Falls has 10,000 more people than we do. It wasn't that long ago that we were actually bigger than Idaho Falls. And if you look at our city compared to other cities of comparable size, like Caldwell, Coeur d'Alene, Twin Falls, they are all having levels of growth that far exceed ours. I think one of the things that really holds us up here is not only our taxation rate, but the way we treat businesses that are here. Just recently, just this week actually, the Valentine Ballroom and Bridal, if you look at that building on Main Street, a beautiful restoration in our Old Town area. And how are they rewarded? 2 misdemeanors. They're awarded with 2 misdemeanors.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
With the hottest and driest weather in 96 years, some Western cities have rationed water and passed water ordinances. The lower Portneuf aquifer, our sole source of drinking water, is vulnerable to contamination. What are your ideas to protect and secure our drinking water quality and quantity? And would you ensure that this is included in the city's comprehensive plan? And we'll start with Brian Blatt.
Okay, thank you. There's a number of things I would like to address from that last question, but I will address them later or at some other point. The first focus needs to be on water conservation. Our citizens of Pocatello currently use less water today than we did 15 years ago. This is a result of a number of different factors. We have focused on education to our citizens, on water conservation, and have implemented a tiered rate system on which also furthers our efforts. In addition, we will focus on creating an aquifer recharge site, which is a site where we will inject surface water back into the aquifer in order to alleviate the current strain on this precious resource. We have also created a groundwater protection advisory group to research and implement these and other solutions. I have ensured that this is a critical element of our comprehensive plan and will continue moving forward. It remains in the forefront.
Thank you. Chris Stevens.
Well, first of all, we need to actually understand everything we can possibly understand about our aquifer. We actually do not have a comprehensive understanding of how it works, how it recharges, etc. There are folks up at ISU working on this, but we have a ways to go before we have anything vaguely approaching comprehensive information. We need to replace the septic systems in the city that are well beyond their effective life. This is going to be very expensive. We've been told 10 or perhaps as much as 20 million for Johnny Creek alone. So the traditional limited improvement district approach is not financially feasible given the high costs and the relatively low number of septics, about 225. It appears that federal COVID dollars could be applied to cover some of the initial cost of completing a mainline sewer into Johnny Creek and elsewhere in the city. I believe that a task force comprised of pertinent city employees, local experts, and perhaps a specialist consultant need to conduct research regarding our comprehensive water situation and make recommendations prior to jumping to conclusions of what we should and shouldn't do. And those recommendations need to be part of our comprehensive plan and our non-existent citywide strategic plan.
Thank you. David Worley.
So there's an old saying, water is true wealth in a dry land. I think that applies in our case. We could also say that without water, our land is useless. Water security should definitely be part of the city's comprehensive plan. But our aquifer has some unique vulnerabilities. For example, most aquifers, the water movement is moving in terms of inches and years. Ours moves much quicker. It moves feet and weeks. So when you have toxins or something like that in the aquifer, they can move a lot quicker and create a lot bigger issues faster. So I do think that does justify looking at how we can protect our aquifer from contamination. When we go and do that and look at water security overall, I think that we need to look outside of Pocatello and look at other communities with similar populations, similar climates and circumstances, because there are cities who've already cracked the nut on this in other parts of the country. But it's also important to look at examples of places such as, for example, California, where water security has become a huge issue, not just with contaminants, but just water availability, to make sure that we don't fall in the same policy failure traps the other cities have done that have failed. But I think overall, there are solutions to these issues, but we need to make sure that we have a comprehensive assessment of our problems and borrow best practices from other localities before we start spending tens of millions of dollars on various solutions. Thank you.
Thank you. James Bucci.
Okay, the aquifer, it's more than just a Pocatello issue. I mean, it's about individuals and businesses having the responsibility for it. But when I was looking this up, I guess it's the farms that have the runoff from all the manure from the cows and everything, and that's leaking nitrates into the aquifer. And I didn't know this, but I guess long-term ingestion of nitrates has adverse health effects like colorectal cancer and whatnot. And I was reading on the Idaho Conservation League about this, and it's more than just a citywide thing. We need to get together as a state, because this aquifer is huge. It's the size of Lake Erie. Like, I don't think people realize how big this is and how much pollution gets dragged into it from the farms. That's a major issue. Now, before the water leaves and runoffs on the farms, we need to make some wetlands, which are just small, shallow ponds. So when it runs off, you have your plants in there and some animals. You have the soils taking in the nitrates and phosphates, so it's not going into the water source down into the aquifer. All right. There's also an issue there's a loophole that I guess the Idaho Conservation League pointed out, that you can take the manure from the cows, and instead of having to deal with all the regulations on the farm, you can just take it and move it to another field, and the regulation, so you can bypass those regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. The J.R. Simplot Company's fertilizer plant and the FMC Superfund site located on the border of Bannock County are major polluters of air, soil, surface water, and groundwater in this area. What is your plan for attracting quality, environmentally sound jobs to our region for sustained economic growth? Begin with Chris Stevens. Chris, you need to unmute.
No, I know, and Jenny took my video off, so I'm dealing with new technical stuff on this end.
You're back.
Okay, all right. So first of all, the process for attracting jobs is essentially the same regardless of who the potential employer is. We need to work closely with state, regional, and county economic development entities to explore and develop possibilities. As a city, again, strategic planning, we need to set the criteria for who we want as employers in our city. We have to work closely to develop relationships with companies that match our criteria as per our plan. Economic development is about developing relationships and trust. It does not happen overnight. Unfortunately, we have neglected this area for the past 12 years and have virtually nothing imminent in the pipeline. We need to be going into economic development overdrive in this community. We are being surpassed by communities around us. They are doing something that is working. We are not. We can learn from them, but it's going to start with us having a plan. Thank you.
Thank you. David Worley.
Yeah, so we want economic growth. We need to create a better business climate in Pocatello. That means getting city spending under control so we can reduce taxes. It also means reducing the regulatory burden the city puts on our businesses. And because it's related, I'm going to finish the story I got cut off earlier. So we had the Valentine Ballroom and Bridal, a great local business that put a lot of time and effort and a lot of funds into restoring a building in our downtown area in Old Town. And that's something the city claims it wants. And their reward is 2 misdemeanors for having very minor sign violations that technically weren't up to some code when it comes to the Old Town area. That is driving businesses away, and it's also punishing the ones that we have. I will seek out businesses that match our community's strengths and values. We have some amazing assets here. We are on a major interstate highway and railroad hub. We have an excellent technical training program at ISU, but most of the students who graduate from those programs leave Pocatello because there are no jobs for them here. I think we need to bring manufacturing jobs to our city. One thing we learned during the pandemic is that we are over-dependent on foreign products and foreign production. We should bring jobs that pay well and match the job training programs we already have. The future of Made in America should include Made in Pocatello. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Blatt.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm not sure the question's been answered yet, but I will tell you this. I am very proud of my track record attracting green jobs. FMC or Simplot has completely, over the past 10 years, completely lined the gypsum stack, reducing any contaminants into greatly reducing the contaminants into the groundwater. FMC's Superfund site has been actively engaged in efforts to mitigate the contaminants to the groundwater over the past 12 years. Just recently, they have worked with the city of Pocatello to drill wells on city property to test their efforts on groundwater to see what effects they've had, and they've had very positive effects on that as well. In addition to helping local businesses become environmentally friendly, the city focuses on green energy. Focus on green energy will help attract tech, manufacturing, and energy jobs in that sector, all of which support economic development while minimizing the traditional carbon footprint from urban growth. One example is the relationship the city of Pocatello has with the INL. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, recently there have been incidents of hate crimes in our community. Pocatello's Human Relations Advisory Committee deals with these concerns. Boise has a resolution renouncing hate groups. How would you combat this problem to make our cities safer for everyone? David Worley.
So I completely reject the concept of hate crime. There is only crime. When you punish people more for committing crime against specific groups, what you're really saying is that the law should protect some people more and others less. I completely reject that notion. I believe the law should protect all people equally. Thank you.
Okay, James Bucci.
All right. I do believe there are hate crimes. A couple of years ago, there was a bus driver who, when a child was getting off the bus, he closed the door on his arm and he dragged him for like 10 or 15 feet. It was obvious he was in the door. And the child was, I believe he was African-American. And nothing happened to this bus driver. When they interviewed him, asked him if he was racist, he had him and his dog was there. He's like, no, I'm not racist. My dog's black. And that's heinous. That is heinous. That is a crime. That is a hate crime. You cannot deny that. He didn't get anything. There was nothing with that. What we need to do is actually persecute these hate crimes. I see the swastika written all over the place, all right? Because I do walk everywhere, and it may just be stupid juvenile children, but that's something, because a hate crime, it's more heinous than someone just like jumping a random person, because you're picking someone out for a specific reason to hate them for, and that is unacceptable. There is no reason to do this. I have people come up to me talking bad about African Americans and Asians, and I'm sitting here like, you're racist. And they're like, no, what you have to do is point it out to them, because a lot of these people don't realize what they're saying is racist. Even if they say it tongue in mouth, it's still racism, and we need to stop it. And it's up to the individuals to point it out and stop it. But I would like to see people come down harder on hate crimes to police force. Thank you.
Thank you. Brian Blatt.
You have listed one right in the question. I became the liaison to the Human Relations Advisory Committee when the liaison was removed for inappropriate conduct, contrary to the organization's purpose and the spirit of Pocatello. We continue to work with the board on any incidences that may occur in Pocatello. We have included our police department in efforts and have a specific officer assigned to prioritize outreach efforts to diverse communities within Pocatello. At the time of George Floyd's death, I, along with our police department, marched alongside members of our community during this time of tragedy, and spoke to the event to ensure that Pocatello and its citizens knew that this type of hate and intolerance have no place in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Stevens. I
Can
believe
you
you're
hear
muted.
me? Can you
Now we
hear me?
can. We
All
can
right,
now.
all
Yes.
right, but yeah, okay. All right, all right. So currently, the Human Relations Committee is not actually empowered to really make recommendations or take action. It really is a listening body. I believe we need an active task force composed of Pocatello law enforcement, representatives from various underserved populations, and victims' rights advocates who are empowered to solicit information from the community and discuss and problem solve around the big picture, and then make recommendations to City Council. I'm loath to simply jump in and say that we understand our situation, that we have a high number of active hate crimes. I don't know that yet. I think we need to do some research. I'm not denying it. I'm not embracing it. We need to do the appropriate research to determine critical information, the number of actual hate crimes as defined by the law, and other negative instances that seem to stem from hatred for an individual or group. And we need to hear the victims' stories. We need to hear from the people who are having the experiences before we start trying to understand how to solve the problem. Once we've gathered data, then we define the problem, and then we include the entire community and law enforcement
Thank you.
in discussions.
Thank you. Okay. Now we will allow each candidate to have 1 minute for a closing statement. We'll begin with James Bucci.
Thank you. Like I said earlier, I am literally just your average guy. I make less than 30 grand. I'm stocking shelves at the grocery store. All right. We need more of a voice. But beyond that, we need to actually come together. If I haven't been knocking on your door yet, I will be there, because that's how I'm doing this. And I won't stop knocking on doors if I'm elected, because I want people's input and I want them to know what is happening in government, because that's how you get people involved. You can't have them come to us. We need to go to them. All right. We need this city to start speaking up, because, for instance, the Governor Little, he wants to use the COVID relief funds for daycare and stuff, but that's in the social infrastructure bill. And why would we waste those COVID resources when we could have our congressmen and senators talking to them, saying, yes, we want that from the social infrastructure bill. We need the people to be saying this to them. And I'm going to go door to door and tell people this.
Thank you. Brian Blatt.
Okay, thank you. I've been trying to go through my electronics here, and so thank you very much. Tonight, there have been claims of fiscal irresponsibility, lack of foresight, and business hostility from my opponents. Let me make the record perfectly clear. Our city is in better financial state than it has ever been. We have robust financial reserves capable of funding the needed infrastructure projects for our projected growth. We have developed long-term contracts and relationships with local businesses and large corporations who have brought jobs, tax dollars, and vibrant community to our city. City staff who work on building permits and zoning are accessible and driven to help businesses open and flourish. We are actively reducing the carbon footprint and preparing for the future growth so that it can be done sustainably. Pocatello is made up of.
Thank you.
Oh, I hate 1 minute and that's it. Thank you.
Chris Stevens.
All right, I'm unmuted, but I have to wait I can't do anything about the visual until it comes up on my screen. Here it comes. Okay. All right. First of all, we do have robust emergency reserves, enough to keep the lights on and pay people for 3 months. Those funds are not intended to be used to balance the budget. So I need to take exception to that. If I'm elected, I will focus on revitalizing our administrative support structure, including finding a way over time to hire a chief administrative officer who is experienced in how to run a municipal corporation. I will stabilize our finances by working with council to adopt binding budgeting policies, which we do not currently have in all cases, and ensure best practice balanced budgeting. I will encourage economic development by, one thing I will do is create city community economic rapid response teams to
Thank you.
shepherd.
Okay, David Worley.
I think the choice here is pretty clear. So regardless of what the mayor is going to say, based on what he has said, basically his argument is everything's fine and we're doing well. But if you live and you work in Pocatello, you know that's not the case. If you own a business in Pocatello, you know that's not true, regardless of what he says. Taxes are too high, our regulations are too burdensome, and we are not growing, we're not developing. The data is clear. Job growth, population growth has been anemic. We have one of the highest tax rates in Idaho, while at the same time having one of the lowest median household incomes. As a matter of fact, the lowest when you compare us to other cities of comparable size. So we're obviously taxing way beyond our tax base. Our citizens need to see the city reduce its spending, reduce taxes, so that the citizens of Pocatello can keep their hard-earned wages. We need change now. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, that's the end of our questions for this evening. Recordings of tonight's forum will be available for on-demand viewing. Links will be posted on the League's website at lwvid.org on Friday. League is always open to new members of all genders. Membership information can be found at the site. Remember to vote on November 2nd. Early voting at the Bannock County Elections Office started and ends on Friday, October 29th. For more information, visit vote411.org, the League's go-to election site, or the Bannock County Elections Office at bannockcounty.us/elections/. The Pocatello League is grateful to the candidates and League members who made this forum possible. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you.